Today, we're going to be talking about democratic workplace models. So, how a few companies organize their hierarchies in a democratic way. So I want to look at that today. I found a nice little source that had a few cool examples. You might remember we talked about this topic already. When was it? Some time ago, yeah, in a previous stream that we talked about it, and we discussed like kind of the basics of what is like democratic workplaces and how those can be formed, and we looked at the Mondragon cooperatives as an example. But now I want to dive in a little bit deeper on that subject. I found this very interesting source for this. So it is a master's thesis called An Alternative Organizational Model, Workplace Democracy. It is by, I'm going to try to pronounce this name, Marijn van der Vliet. Van der Vliet. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. It's a Dutch name, so my apologies if I am mangling the name. If you want to have a look at the study, I put it there in the chat. You can have a look-see. It is publicly available. But yeah, so the master thesis examines, democratic workplace as a concept, and then shows a few companies as examples. So here's a quote from the synopsis of the thesis. This thesis examines the theory and practice of workplace democracy and its relation to the current strategic management literature about organization and decision-making in firms. Within this literature, a distinction is made between traditional top-down and hierarchical models and more recent bottom-up and emergent thought. The former holds the decision-making process is solely the domain of managers. The latter contends that all employees ought to play a role in providing the inputs for the managers to make their decisions. Workplace democracy goes a step further and holds that all employees also ought to democratically make the decisions. So, I talked about this in the earlier time we talked about this, but the problem with the current top-down system is that it causes people to feel alienated from their work because they lack autonomy and control of their work. So people can't really decide when and how they work necessarily, and they're just told what to do essentially. And these autocratic systems that we have currently in our workplaces infantilize the worker by having them be dependent of the corporation and not being able to develop or mature within the work environment. All right, let's start looking at those companies then. So we're going to start with a company called Semco. It is an industrial company in Brazil, the big country of Brazil. Almost said it. Company of Brazil. Industrial company in Brazil, formed in 1953. So it used to be a top-down traditional company until Ricardo Semler became the CEO after his father's death. So he noticed that the current structure doesn't really work. There's problems with it. So he oversaw managerial changes throughout the 1980s based on democracy, profit sharing, and information. Those were the key things that he recognized as important for the change and for the company to become better at what it does. So after these changes, the company grew from $4 million USD annual revenue in 1982 to $212 million USD in revenue in 2003. They also grew from 90 employees in 1982 to 3,000 in 2003. And they, at the time of, around that time, so around 2003, I think, 1% was the annual employee turnover rate, which is very, very low. That's a very low employee turnover rate, which is really good because you want people to stay in your company. That is the basics of the company. There's a lot more detail into, how they made the changes to the company, from what it was, etc., that the thesis goes into. For sake of brevity, I'm not going to go into the super details right now, but we will move on to talk about the structure of the company itself. So Semco has found that the most effective unit, what they call manufacturing cells, consists of about 150 people. So this is based on their trial and error through the years of having smaller and bigger manufacturing cells, and they have arrived at this number through their own empirical tests. So these cells can be defined by product, market, or machine, because they have different products that they make in a variety of industries. And these cells are cross-disciplinary. So in one cell, you'll have, people who make the products or production, sales, marketing, finance, HR. So that there are many people from different fields that are in the same group. Above these manufacturing cells, so on a higher level, there is a federal structure where each business unit has an elected factory committee, which is comprised of every part of the organization except management. And this committee will also have a union representative in it. So the purpose of this committee is to meet with top management regularly to discuss workplace-related issues and politics as well. So you can see here there is a way for the workers to discuss and make changes with top management. We have this factory committee for each business unit, as mentioned. But also, Semco used to have a traditional organizational pyramid, so, CEOs, board people at the top, and then from there down you go like C-level, managers, workers, etc. Typical pyramid model. But they replaced that with an organizational circle. So they made up of these 3 circles. The innermost circle is made up of 6 counselors who are comparable to vice presidents in a normal company. Well, not normal, but a typical company. And they determine the general policy and strategy of the company. The middle circle, so there's this, and then we have the next circle, is made up of partners who are division heads. And then we have the outermost circle, and this is made up of coordinates and associates. Coordinators and associates. So coordinators are comparable to supervisors or foremen at a typical company. Associates are the rest of the workers, essentially. And then the coordinators and associates form triangles, so typical hierarchies within the outermost circle. And these business units are all self-governed. So the business units are self-governed. The coordinators only have associates reporting to them. They never report to other coordinators. All subordinates can interview and must agree to a new promotion or hire. So if you're like, we want to hire this person from outside the company or within the company or promote someone, then all the subordinates have a chance to be interviewed and must agree to this. And most workers set their own hours either individually or collectively. They also set their own production quotas and help with design and marketing. So they are heavily involved in the whole process of making a product, which is, it's good. Then people learn more skills and cross-disciplinary skills within the company, which means that they can move within the company to different roles. So Semco has recognized that infantilization is a problem in traditional workplace. So this means that you treat the people that work there as not being able to make good decisions for themselves or deciding in their best interest, because you treat them kind of like children. You're like, well, they can't make the right decisions, so they need people at the top who are smart, who can make the right decisions. And they treat their employees as adults by, for example, abolishing dress codes and many other rules. So yeah, you can get rid of that stuff and trust your people. However, it is important to note about Semco that the company is still not worker-owned, so this structure is more democratic. However, the company is still not worker-owned, but the CEO owns the majority share in the company and could, in theory, veto any democratic decision. Right now, it is not in the interest of the current CEO to do that, but if the CEO changes and the new CEO decides that, fuck it, we're going to do it the traditional way, they could just change everything. Usually the average worker doesn't have, or is not given, enough info to really make large decisions. Exactly. Hence why Semco here talks about, or why Semco has recognizes information sharing as one of the most important things, and it is a topic that comes up in the other companies as well. Information sharing is critical so that people can be informed and make good decisions. But yeah, so important to note that the company is not owned by the workers. It's still majority owned by the CEO, and things could change dramatically if the CEO wants. So they could go a step further in the future to make it worker owned. Let's get to the profit sharing part then of Semco. So each division twice a year gives 23% of the after-tax profit of the division to 3 employees elected by the workers of that division. So those 3 can invest the money until the division can meet and decide by majority vote what to do with the money. Usually this means dividing the money equally among the workers. Also, each employee can take a salary cut up to 25%, and if the company has a good year, then the employee is commensurately to the cut taken up to 125% of their regular salary. So in this way, the worker can take risk, and if things work out, they get rewarded for it. But if there is a bad year, then the salary continues at the reduced amount. But in this way, the workers can decide if they're like, well, last year was a little bit rough. Let's take, pay cuts so that we can reduce our overhead. And if we, come back on top from there, then we benefit from it all. So here we can see the profit sharing is it's good. It's better than a normal, typical, I would say, company where profit sharing is minimal. You get little scraps here and there, but not much. So yeah, that's Semco. That is company of Semco in Brazil. Of course, this is the highlights of this thesis that I found. So there's a lot more detail that goes into this. This is not all encompassing. All right, let's jump to the next company then. This one is called the John Lewis Partnership. It is in the UK. It was originally a draper shop started by John Lewis in 1864 in the UK, and it then proceeded to grow into a department store in the next 40 years after that. So then John's son, John Spuden Lewis, when his father died in 1928, converted the firm into a public company, and this is an interesting part. He published the firm's first 268-page constitution. So he published a thick book about how the company should be run. So nowadays, the John Lewis Partnership operates 29 full-line department stores, 6 at-home stores focusing on electrical, home, and technological products, a web store, as well as a catalog business and a direct service company under the John Lewis brand. So, it is a big company. The partnership employed 76,500 partners, these are employees, in 2010, with a £7.4 billion turnover, resulting in £306.6 million in net profit. So this is a big company. Very, very big company in the UK. But even that is seldom done, True. So this is the basics of John Lewis partnership. Again, this company has a lot more nuance to the history of starting and then with the Constitution, etc., etc. But I will, for the sake of brevity, not go into that. If you want to read more on that, it is in the study. I will actually thesis. Sorry, not study. Thesis. I will post it again there. So if you want to read it, go for it. It's a bit of a long one though. But if you want to go for it. Then, okay, let's talk about the structure of the John Lewis partnership. So at the core of this company's organizational model is its constitution, which I just mentioned, a thick fat book that John Lewis is like, bam! Here's a book, motherfucker. So the latest version of the constitution, dating to December 2011, identifies the purpose of the partnership as the happiness of all its members through their worthwhile and satisfying employment in a successful business. So this is the core of what the company is all about, which is cool to see that as a core thing. So the power structure of the partnership consists of the partnership council, the partnership board, and the chairman of the board, as well as a number of lower level councils and forums. The chairman has responsibility for the partnership's commercial performance. The chairman's duties include upholding the Constitution, promoting the well-being of the partnership in every possible way to ensure the system for deciding pay and benefits of the individual partner is fair, and ensuring that the long-term security and democratic principles of the partnership is not threatened by the decision of others. So you might already notice that this is starting to sound an awful lot like a democratic country. And I think when John Spuden Lewis, so John Lewis's son, but now from now on when I say John Lewis, I will be referring to John Spuden Lewis, who wrote the Constitution. But it definitely sounds like he took a lot of influence from, democratic countries and how they are run. Then, the partnership board is responsible for major policy changes and allocating financial and non-financial resources. It also decides what part of the profit is needed for developing the partnership and what part is to be shared with all the partners, aka the employees, directly through a yearly partnership bonus. Dope. The partnership council may ask the partnership board and chairman anything it wishes, and they must answer unless doing so would damage the partnership in their opinion. The council can also discuss any topic and make suggestions which the chairman must accept as fully as possible and can only reject after consulting the partnership board. The council has the power to dismiss the chairman, and the members of the council are elected democratically, and any partner, so employee, can stand for election. So let's recap that. So the partnership council is made up of partners who are essentially the employees, and any partner, aka employee, can run for the partnership council. There's a whole process that they go into on how that process, the voting process goes. There's like a whole election, and each district has their own election, etc., etc. It's detailed in the thesis. It's very much like you'd run the UK. I think it's mentioned in the thesis that it is like the House of Commons, etc. I don't remember right now, but it is a very democratically run country type of process. And then this partnership council can ask the board and chairman anything it wishes, and they have to reply to them unless they would deem it damaging to the partnership. And the council also has the power to dismiss the chairman, who is essentially, kind of the CEO equivalent here, kind of. So, think about that. The workers, representatives made up of workers, have the power to dismiss the chairman. Pretty dope. And then lastly, about the structure, the Constitution also guarantees competitive pay rates in order to attract and retain high caliber people, while also limiting the pay of the highest paid partner to no more than 75 times the pay of the that is a mistake, of the lowest paid, while generally holding that pay rates ought to be able to pass scrutiny if made public, although they are not public as a matter of policy. So that's also, we saw this also in the Mondragon cooperatives. They had a similar, it wasn't as high, I think it was much lower there. I think it was 6 times, if I recall, the difference between the highest and lowest paid. Here it's 75 times, but that is still notably lower than in a lot of big capitalist companies where the difference between the highest and lowest paying can be hundreds of times. If you look at what, let's say, Jeff Bezos earns and what the lowest earner of Amazon earns, you can start to see how that differs. Then the profit sharing. The partnership board decides what percentage of profits is needed for reinvestment in the partnership, as mentioned before, and the amount is shared with all, and that amount is shared with all partners through the yearly bonus. This bonus consists of a percentage of the regular annual wage of each partner, with each partner getting the same percentage. So there we go again. Sharing profit with the workers. That's dope. And that is the John Lewis partnership. There's a lot more detail in the thesis about how this structure works in practice with the voting and forming of the different parts of it. I didn't go into the lower level councils and forums at all because that was a bit too much in the weeds in my opinion. But if you want to read about it, go for it. Let's get to the last company. This is a little bit closer to home for us Nordic people. It's a company called Kantega. I hope I'm saying that right. It is an employee-owned Norwegian IT company focusing on developing custom software and security software. Hey, it's in Norway. That's in the Nordics, like me and many of you. It was founded in 2003 when employees bought out a part of another IT company in a buyout process. So there was another IT company that was being bought out, and then the employees bought out a part of that company, and then the other part went to I think it was a Swedish IT company. So in 2011, they had about 85 employees, which was up from 40 employees since the buyout in 2003. And in 2010, they made over 10 million euros in revenue. So, they're making good money. They're a smaller company than the two others that we looked at, but, fairly sized, like a medium-sized company. So let's talk about the structure of Cantega. So the employee ownership is organized through an internal share ownership plan. So after a 6-month trial period at the company, all employees earn the right to buy shares of the company each month, and most do because they're given the chance. So after you work there for 6 months, it's like, hey, now you can buy shares, and you can do so every month. And Cantega has set up an agreement with a bank so that employees are able to get a loan to finance the shares if needed. So, if you're strapped for cash, they have a deal with the bank and you can loan money to buy the shares. And to further make the buying of shares accessible to new employees, Cantega keeps its share price at the lowest possible value allowed by Norwegian law, which is pretty dope. And each employee is allowed a max ownership of 50,000 shares. Cool. We should note, however, that it is not a publicly traded company. It is only internally owned by the employees. They also have a board of directors, which consists of 2 external representatives and 3 representatives elected by and from its employees. They have an annual general assembly where all shareholders can vote, but even employees who do not hold shares can participate by listening in and, commenting there, but they don't have any voting power. So they do have a traditional pyramid-style hierarchy, so you have managers and top-level people. However, employees are expected to be informed about important decisions right from the start and kept up to date as things develop. So this is the information sharing that was mentioned before. And managers are recruited internally, to make sure that they are familiar with the culture and the way the company is run, and employees are involved in this process. So they are also talked with when managers are being recruited. It's a pretty simple system. Straightforward, I would say. And then in regards to profit sharing, Cantega distributes profits to employees through dividends. So in 2010, Cantega paid out a dividend of 3 Norwegian kroner per share for a maximum of 150,000 kroner, or almost 20,000 euros in profits per employee through dividends. That's pretty dope. If you have a lot of shares, hey, you get a nice bonus every year if the company's doing well. That's really nice, right? And that is Kantega. This was a shorter one than Semco and John Lewis partnership because it's fairly straightforward. And the thesis also talks about the Mondragon cooperatives, but I didn't want to discuss that again since we have already discussed that before. I didn't want to repeat myself. And it also talks about the recovered companies in Argentina, but I didn't want to go into those because it was about the financial crash that happened in Argentina in the early 2000s, and then how workers bought out companies from the owners, or expropriated, that's the word. So they bought the companies to themselves because of the collapse, or they expropriated them to themselves. And I didn't want to discuss it because there wasn't much about like how they're organized and what the profit sharing model is. It was more about, that part was more about like how they recovered the companies, and then what the benefits of that were. You know, a lot of companies still ended up failing, but a lot stayed around because of these recoveries, and the companies worked a lot together. They worked a lot together, which meant a lot of information sharing and supporting each other, but I didn't want to go into it more than that because it didn't really fit the way I was going through the stuff. But yes, so that was some models on how to organize a more democratic workplace. So we had Semco in Brazil, John Lewis partnership in the UK, and Kantega in Norway. So showing you have companies around the world that are doing this to varying degrees of success and in different ways. Some having actual ownership by the workers, some having still ownership by, shareholders or the CEO, but being organized in a way where the workers have a way to affect how the company is run, and the profit sharing is coming more back to the workers. So there you go. That was my segment on this.